Rhythm games are always an interesting review. Sure, the gameplay can feel familiar to other games in the genre, but each usually has its own spin on the formula. And as we've seen over the years, rhythm games are becoming more and more experimental or genre defining more than anything else. Obviously, pointing to things like Crypt of the Necrodancer, or even something more secondary rhythm like Hi Fi Rush. Today's game definitely puts the unique points towards the story element of the game. Unbeatable is a Kickstarted game that released on December 9th, 2025 for the price of $27.99. Yes, I know I'm a little late to the party for this game that's on the PC, specifically Steam, the Xbox Series X and S, and the PlayStation 5. For reference, I played the game on Steam and have about 22 hours in the game, beating the main story and playing some of the arcade to round things out. The question present is simple here. Can the rhythm of Unbeatable get the masses banging to the beat in harmony? Or will the chaos of the noise, like a chapter of The World Ends With You, overwhelm it in the end? Let's find out, shall we? I went back and forth on where to start here, but let's start with what will probably have you coming back for more: the gameplay. Like I said, this is a rhythm game, but it does have a story mode. But let us start with the main mechanics and overall vibe of the rhythm gameplay. Your characters stay in the middle of a playing field that can shift as notes come at you, and this is really a two-button game. One button for those above your character and one for those below. Like any other rhythm game, hit the note as the note crosses across right in front of your character, and the game will score you based on how accurate it is, to a score scaling from perfect to miss. The controls may take a second to get used to if you use a controller, because the main keys are the left and right bumpers with an Xbox controller, which may seem okay at first, but then you realize that left doesn't always correspond with a left note, and right doesn't always correspond with a right note. It does take a little bit of time, and it's a little bit better on the keyboard, but honestly, it still takes a little bit because I was still making mistakes even 2/3 of the way through the story. The game does have non-standard notes as well that are typical in the genre, such as a hold note for a period of time, or smash notes for a period of time as much as you can. Now, it does pull a more refreshing trick or two as well, such as this note that you need to follow up with after you hit the first part, like a 1-2 punch, which was a welcome addition, and actually I really liked it. Notes accuracy was a great strength of the game as well. At no point was I questioning the timing and it being off from a visual or audio aspect. It does help that the game does have a good offset tool to calibrate the visual and audio delays of your specific system, whether it be a more high refresh frame rate in terms of your monitor or, well, anything. There are 6 possible different difficulties for each song here, ranging from baby's first rhythm game to, well, there goes my fingers and any movement in them for the next couple of hours. Now, for the sake of this review, I had started on what was the normal difficulty, but I did move it to the harder ones as I do have some experience in the genre, and I found the challenge to, well, on normal it was good, but I wanted to be challenged a little bit more. It does hit a good range within the difficulties. I do think somebody who is new to the genre or a veteran will find the right difficulty and not feel like the game doesn't challenge them at whichever one they choose. And part of me says that you will want to test out a few arcade tracks before hitting the story, just for knowing where you want the difficulty to be for that section, because there's a lot there and you sort of want to start that from the beginning. The enjoyment of this gameplay is going to come down to how adaptable you are to its little differences from standard rhythm games if you have experience in those genres. For example, visually with the switching of sides, it can be a little off-putting, even motion sick-inducing, how the transitions happen from one section to the next. Yes, there are options to help with this in the options menu, but even then, it's still going to take some getting used to. If you play rhythm games, you may have to do a little unprogramming for the left and right element as mentioned before, because even after playing 20 plus hours in this game, it's still causing me problems, especially when there's rapid changes in between them, from both the left and right side and the up and down element. But it's also very fresh in the same breath. The way that the field is done forces you to think a little differently when it goes in between each side, and the game is unafraid to do unconventional key combinations that may feel awkward at first, especially at higher difficulties, but they still are doable, especially as you get into the flow of the song. Part of it has to do with how well the beats fit within these songs. I was impressed at how well the different difficulties match the songs, as usually from what I've seen from other rhythm games, there's always one or two difficulties that match the song well, and any other ones just don't compare. Granted, there's definitely going to be a groove you'll get into if you keep on the same difficulty, and the feeling of what you get from the beats and what won't be beats. I will go on a tangent here, however, and directly talk to the developers. Devs, for the love of God, if you want your game to really resonate in the rhythm game community, please put a retry option in the pause screen. I shouldn't have to go back to the song menu to retry a song. It wastes time, especially if you're trying to perfect a particular tricky song. The thing is that you understood several other elements about the rhythm genre, things like the calibration, for example. That one is done particularly well, so I don't understand this choice. Maybe it's structural, maybe it's the engine that you're using, but find a way to do this. Playable variety is good, but I will say that in terms of the extremes of the tracks, I did want a little bit more. Think something like Through the Fire and the Flames with the Guitar Hero. Those tracks that really stand out as different or weird or something completely out of left field. Unbeatable is very safe in what it chooses, and I understand that for the story mode, it all has to cohesion together, but for playable music like in the arcade mode, I do wish it was a little bit more bold with its choices or found something a little bit different. Granted, you do get more if you buy the Breakout Edition, but I'm gonna be honest, without really knowing the tracks in the Breakout Edition, putting down another $10 or so for 20 more tracks, yeah, it makes sense, but it's a hard sell to me because I don't know what's in it. Specifically, I don't know what's in it, and considering that even though there is variety, there aren't those weird-ass choices that make me think, oh, this will be any different. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Now, arcade mode isn't the only place you'll play the gameplay in. There's the story mode, which of course connects a written story to some gameplay, but it's a little bit different than what you've seen before. As I mentioned in the intro, Unbeatable is different in the fact that, to me, it works in the rhythm gameplay a lot more naturally into the story than most rhythm games, to both its strength and its detriment. When the gameplay is literally you escaping from a prison and in time to a beat, and the rhythm's mechanics change due to that, the game is really synergizing well and makes the game stand out as something not just worth playing, but something I want to experience right now. The baseball minigame is a good example of keeping the rhythm gameplay up and really changing things just a tiny bit, but it making sense. And it's also fun, which, you know, is sort of the point. I did like how it played with timing in these games, like the baseball game where it would do this sort of screw attack with the ball so that you would have to get used to that specific beat, sort of the rest beats that would naturally occur between notes. That was great, and it actually teaches music theory in certain ways. With that said, sometimes it wasn't necessarily easy to understand if you were making mistakes. Granted, you get those indications of, like, great and everything that you would see, but, like, sometimes sound was missing, in particular with that rail section I just showed. And that part would make you a little bit uneasy, like, did I do that right? Did I not do that right? What's going on? The problem with the story's gameplay is specifically dealing with the pacing. The fact is, I understand that the game wanted to set up the story. It's important to set up the story's characters, the people involved. But when in the first hour of gameplay, I've played maybe one song in a game that's obviously focusing on rhythm, something is terribly wrong. Which is weird because the game does, at several points later on, set up scenarios where it breaks up things a little bit with a side minigame or, some little side quest. And does it effectively, might I add. In fact, I actually found those weird beaten path minigames to be some of the most fascinating parts of the game. So why didn't it happen here? And in particular, and I don't mean this to be, it was purposely designed this way, but if you're making a game on Steam where the first 2 hours are obviously going to come into a play in terms of refunds and everything, not having more songs in that first part, I feel like the game is hurting itself because a rhythm game is a rhythm game. People are going to want to see the rhythm game part. What I want to sum up this section with is I love the rhythm game part here, and the fact is, I feel like it has a lot to build off of. Now, would I have liked to see a track editor or custom elements that can be imported? Absolutely. But I understand that's not what the game was focusing on, and you would have to eliminate the story for, the budget that was created. And I don't think that would have been a great idea. With that said, I do want more, and I do want more of this particular rhythm construction. And I hope that they add more DLC that's cheaper than $10 for 20 tracks. But, more. After going through my edits here and realizing I missed something that I really wanted to talk about, I do like the fact that the game does give you a more numerical element when you're hitting a note. You'll notice that it is like plus 45, plus 2, minus 13. Those are how far you are off to a perfect note. You can still get a perfect note at things like 20, 30, 40, but that's how close you are to the actual middle of the note. And if you're noticing that you're like hitting 20, 20, 20, 20, you could adjust yourself a little bit more than I think you can in other games. And I did want to point that out for the more experienced rhythm game players out there. I do think the expert rhythm game players are still going to be annoyed by certain elements of this game, in particular the retry element. But for those who want to sort of adjust on the fly, that is a very good feature. With the gameplay thoroughly explained, let's talk about the game's story now, which is probably the feature that makes it stand out the most from its contemporaries in the genre. See, one of the big complaints I've had about rhythm games' story sections was that they feel more separated than actual flowing experiences most of the time. Take a game like Persona 5 Dancing All Night. Yeah, it does have a story, but the story segments, you're taking a break from the gameplay and going into another room to listen to the story, and vice versa. That once the story's done, you're going to another room to play a minigame. You've also got experiences like Elite Beat Agents, which tell a story and react to things, but they're also visual and very simple in nature. Unbeatable definitely isn't in this category. You actually start the game not with the main character, but some context story of a band performance that eventually transitions to the main character, but left me a little confused on exactly where it was going with it, at least to begin with. Anyway, you then do meet the main character Bea, waking up in a field with no understanding of how she got there, and really actually no context of why you are there to begin with. The game's intro is actually very strange, because there's a lot of detail that's left vague or not understanding where it connects, like that initial scene with that band and what it actually means. You find out that music in this world is actually banned, and eventually find out it's because of noise. I'm sorry, no, that's the world ends with you. It's because of silence, which are monsters which seem to be drawn to your music. Sort of. Kind of. One of my big frustrations early on with the story is that it establishes that the reason for the police state is because of the incident that happened. But when music is played canonically in the game, it never really plays into that fact. Nothing seems to happen. Now, that could be somewhat the point, that one incident is overblown and put the world into panic when it shouldn't have. Yes, there's still a problem there, and it could happen again, but honestly, they're probably going about it all wrong. Working with a lack of information is something that you're going to have to get used to in this story, because the game is very much a poker player purposely playing with known tells. It's trying to get you to make assumptions or react at certain points, almost to the point where it's a little bit too on the nose. There were segments of the story where, yeah, I could see something that probably was supposed to be a big reveal coming from a mile away. And I do appreciate the game awarding players who are paying attention. But I also think at times it's too obtuse with certain elements, and ends up hurting the cohesion of the story as a whole, especially when it comes to themes intertwining with each other, and overshadowing when it does pull off a good reveal. The reveals just happen a little bit too often for my taste, and they're all over the place. You may get an indication that I'm very hot and cold when it comes to this story, and to be frank, there's a reason why I rewrote this section to death. I very much am. But I will say this, the core set of characters, especially in the first 2/3 of the game, have a great chemistry, and are actually the stars of the show for good reason. The main duo, Beat and Quaver, have a sister's mentality that plays to them both well without it being too tropey. The jokes between them work well, and each of them plays off the other's weaknesses rather nicely. It's not a buddy cop duo story, but them being the main focus is a smart and wise play here. It's relatable to anybody who has siblings, but the relationship goes beyond that. It's just friends, sisters, almost mother and daughter in a certain way that most people can relate to. And frankly, you want to see them both succeed. It also helps that there's good side characters. The twins of Cleft and Treble provide a good grounding into the rebellion of the world, while actually bringing their perspective into the rebellion and providing good personalities as well. Penny serves as a good mysterious character while having some quirks to her. And the villainish characters are right in their sections, although I wanted a little bit more abreast in the earlier game sections. The writing's quality from scene to scene is good, especially with the insertion of jokes and the characters' personalities naturally into the conversation. You're not guessing at character motivations, but also do get surprised from time to time, and everything feels natural and well done within each section. In fact, looking at each section, each chapter, I would say that the game's writing is one of its biggest strengths. But note that caveat. The pacing. The pacing of the story is the game's biggest flaw, and the thing that may ultimately decide its fate for people out there. It is without a doubt inconsistent, and this is where the idea, at least to me, of maybe the game running out of money. See, there are spots where the game goes into meticulous detail into conversations in the background, even having little fun side elements that really don't mean anything. There is a lot of writing, a lot of words, and this is especially true in the first third of the game. And like I said in the gameplay section, it does sort of conflict with the whole rhythm gameplay element thing, but it establishes the world and puts forward interesting presence. And okay, I'm willing to play along with it. There's good detail here. Then it speeds up a little bit in the second third of the game. And well, this is also where the demo of the game is. And the pacing here is a lot more reasonable. It's more of what I would expect. A good balance between gameplay and story. Some side stories, but not lingering as much in the conversations like in the first third. And everything feels reasonably done. Characters come in, characters go out, but it all feels reasonable. And this is where the game is the strongest. I mean, it makes sense they chose this for the demo here. Then it all falls apart in its third act. The pacing rapidly expands here, and in doing so, the themes of the story and characters get pushed aside a bit. Well, some of them at least. The rebellion element, the being yourself to a lesser extent, safety versus expression, they all just fall by the wayside for a new story of sorts that has been there from the beginning, but now it's mega focused on particular elements. In particular, it hyper fixates on Beat and her perspective and part in the story, even when dealing with other people in the story. What's worse, your bandmates disappear for the most part. The people, mind you, and the synergy that were the biggest strength up to that point. I do not understand this decision, but I think it's because they just ran out of time and used what they could. There are parts where the transition in the story just feels like there was something supposed to be inserted between scene 1 and scene 2. It just feels unnatural at times. And so you're sitting there going, was there supposed to be something? Did I accidentally skip over it or hit a button or something? And that's the biggest problem, is that at times you're wondering if you missed something or we're playing a different game. Which sucks because the Beat part of the story and the emotional nature of her story, especially in the last half of the game, feels like it could have been a lot more effective. And don't get me wrong, it pulls on heartstrings. It feels way too real, and I wouldn't be honestly surprised if the character was an adaptation of real-life events or a tribute to a fallen family member or something along those lines. Again, don't want to spoil things. It could be 100 different types of things, but let's just put that there. But with that said, after you're done with it, you're like, wait, hold on. What happened to the rest of the story? And you start to think about things and start to go back and be like, that felt like a little bit out of left field. Finally, let's talk about the presentation. Because it's a rhythm game, we need to start with the music, of course. And let it be known that the game does have a good mixture of genres. Don't get me wrong, there is a good amount of light rock in this game, especially in the more prevalent story sections of the game. But with that said, it does have some good other types of music, especially in the story mode when it comes to sort of the battles, more aggressive music, more, not necessarily dark music, but more, in-your-face type of music as opposed to the light rock. There is some electronic music. There's songs that you would expect from a rhythm game, especially in the arcade mode. Not exactly a music connoisseur in terms of the different genres and the subgenres, unless if it's anime music. The thing is, though, what gets me more about this music is that there isn't really necessarily a theme to them, a collection of songs that really connect together. Sure, story mode and all the songs that were chosen there for the feelings they invoke makes sense, but what surprised me more is that when I went through the selection of songs, I found it was chosen more for what different note selections were in terms of the gameplay more than anything else. Sure, there was some good music and some great music, but it was the note selection that I kept on coming back to when re-listening to things. Like, of course, there's always going to be similarities in games with certain songs and combinations. Choruses that sound similar, or specific beats and repeatable elements that you come back to because you want the player to learn a little bit and use it in other songs. But every song here did feel reasonably unique and yet familiar, even beyond genres, which was a little bit weird to me, but at the same time also meant that every song felt reasonable to play, like you weren't just playing the same song over and over again. Now, is there music here that I would say is fantastic? No, but that's not what I'm here for in terms of listenable. Yes, I know, it sounds weird. Songs that are listenable, you'd think that would be, 10 out of 10 needed. But this is with gameplay. And with gameplay, it seems to work rather well. I'm going to give you a combination of songs that stood out to me here, so take a listen and hear the different things that I'm talking about. Now, you'd think that with me saying that the music was really good for the game, in terms of the gameplay, that the sound design would come with it. I can't say that. There were times where I was sitting there wondering if the game was glitching out as there was no sound feedback, especially during some of the more unique story sections. But the fact of the matter, it was dependent on what section it was. Again, I talked about the game feeling like it ran out of budget earlier. It felt like this is one of those situations. The baseball minigame, for example, that was an example where it absolutely worked. The sound of the ball flying out and the ping of the bat was spot on. But even within that game, there were times where I expected a sound to occur when it didn't. But in particular, the inputs on the rail section when hitting to the time of the beat, those sounds, or the lack thereof, did absolutely not work. It made me question if I was doing things right without audio, especially with the visual chaos on the screen. And that's going to be something that happens a couple of times during the game for you. Obviously, it's going to play second fiddle to the music, but that input is important. And I'll give some examples here of where I think it was good and where I think it was bad. So take a listen and hear what I'm talking about. I don't think they've used the circles this much yet.
They're shooting at us?
They shot at me, at least.
It's not like this is the first time. We have a kid with us! It's not like this is the first time. I don't think they're lethal. The casing. Wow! I'm so.
Let's also talk voice acting. There's some performances given within the game that I think are strong. In particular, I found Clef to be a standout with her harsh yet energetic role, and Penny with her smart yet snarky attitude. Both these actors were able to express their characters well and change emotionally to the story, especially Clef. Quaver was a good and solid performance too, but had a couple of lines that did stand out a little badly, but not to the point where it really hurt the game. Sadly though, one of the ones I have the most problems with is our main character Bee. There's times where I expected more emotions out of her in obviously heated situations, especially in the back third of the game. And the thing is, those emotions were very inconsistent in terms of performance. You get one scene where it'd be very strong, and you're like, yes, that's exactly what we need. And then another scene, it's not there at all, and you're wondering, like, why is it so monotone? Why is their emotion been ripped out of it? Now, I understand that this kind of role, the beat role, is a weird one, because obviously there's a mysterious element about her, and her vocals are at the forefront of the music at times. You need a singer, and a singer first, and I understand that. But whoever was doing voice direction on her, overlooking her and telling her what she needed to feel and do, I feel like they dropped the ball, because I didn't buy someone who went through the events of the game that are implied, not reacting a little bit more than some of the more monotone performances that the game gave us. Just take a listen and you'll hear some of the things that I'm talking about.
What the hell happened to staying put while we surveyed the area?
Take a wild guess.
This place is huge. What the hell? How did you even get over there? Don't answer that.
She broke the floor.
How? I'm not fat. Okay. Nobody said you were, dude.
That's almost as big of a jump as, well, this.
There's nothing wrong with it either, Clef. Some people feel really badly about their weight and they shouldn't.
I don't!
That's good.
Not because I am, because I'm not.
I mean, the rope overhead did snap like the
People
second.
aren't over here is they're all afraid of pissing me off.
Should they be afraid?
I'm not really violent, if that's what your real question. People just want to keep me happy because I can get stuff for them.
What kind of stuff?
Oh, so many questions. You're a kid, so don't worry about it, but you can't ask me that kind of thing. Nobody can know the what or the how beside me. You know, information economy is real economy.
Okay, reasonable.
Just if you really need something that they won't let you.
Sure.
Anyway,
Hey, I'm sure it's not so...
It is. It's so easy for you to sit there and act like everything's fine,
Negative emotion.
but it's not. You know, I thought I could be a whistleblower.
It'd be easier if I was in the driver's seat on this, but I can still help stir shit up.
But also...
Yes, also that's we need you to be annoying.
Oh, she can handle that for whatever's going on.
What the hell are we talking about? Okay. So, the entire reason me and Quaver are here in the first place was to get you out of here. Yes, because you're idiots. What if we weren't idiots? Yeah, what if?
I assume this.
Beat.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You sound sick or tired or both. It's fine.
Everything always is.
Please, for once in your life, Trouble, stop talking.
That's-
Do not talk to him like that.
Well,
Do you
ooh,
want to know what
okay.
fine means then? Sure, here it goes.
I mean,
I have to kill myself every night doing all of your jobs because none of you. Excuse me? He doesn't even give a shit. He doesn't care how this stuff sounds. We
I like
told
to
you
think I
not
give
to.
a little bit of a shit.
You should be smart about.
finally, let's talk visuals. Unbeatable has a striking style, mixing elements of Jet Set Radio, Persona, and even The World Ends With You into its own unique look. It plays into the whole retro element present in the story with an overplayed VHS tape with the little dots and visual noise on the screen. If you don't know what a VHS tape is, get off my lawn, because I'm old and you're bothering me with your youth. What I found interesting about the art style was the fact that the game would adjust itself a little bit depending on the situation, and sometimes it's in unconventional ways. As you can see here, this is a cutscene of Beat and Quaver talking to each other very close, and the line work is a lot more jagged than you would expect in certain things like this. This is a little bit more basic, a little bit more, I don't want to say kiddish, that's not the word I'm looking for, but it's a little bit more simple, but at the same time, it sort of complements the scene in question, where things are trying to be thought out, things are trying to be understood in certain ways, almost like it's trying to take its form. Like, contrasted against this little gameplay section, the fact is, when you look at like Beat's hair, for example, there's a little bit more detail, honestly. Granted, you are pulled back on the camera, you are obviously in more of an action set piece here in terms of the gameplay, but it is interesting when you think about it. You would think it would be the opposite. It would be less detail in certain areas, but I think the game really complements the moment with what it's trying to express. Obviously, action in this case, and sort of the character itself, and lets the story take over when that presentation wants it to take over. Granted, there are elements that I am not a fan of. Like, for example, the sewer water here, I get that it's getting across the sort of grossness of the sewer, but it also doesn't look right in terms of like everything else. You can also see that just then the water was coming through the floor. There are little technical elements in the presentation that will pop up that will annoy you, where the gameplay and the presentation don't want to work with each other, like here. Treble's got a beat. It's a fast beat. What I want to get across in this presentation section for the positive element is that despite me having concerns about what it was doing in terms of like color usage and sometimes at parts lighting, even though at times lighting is very, very good, it gives off the impression of an indie game that is made with love, where Obviously, there are some inconsistencies, but everything feels purposeful in terms of the feeling that it was trying to go for. And it makes it so that I want to look. I don't necessarily think it's the most pretty looking game, despite the effects when it comes to the gameplay having some good elements to it, where I'm sitting there going, oh, that's interesting. And in particular, the camera movement in certain scenes are very good, especially when it's revealing something. But you could tell that this team was passionate. You could tell that the detail went into what they thought was the best portions of the game, and it shows because I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, I can nitpick this, I can nitpick that, but I'm still enjoying myself 98% of the time. With all that said, even with some of the more interesting choices in terms of presentation, like representing the dark here, it doesn't feel of the same world at times. It almost feels like World of Gooey, but it still works. There are choices where I sit there going, were they choices? Because unfortunately, there are some technical elements in this game that do fail at certain points. Like here, for example, this is fine. Like, you're getting the sense of scale, you're getting the different colors, and especially understanding that there's something, seriously wrong with the world. But then later in the game, where I don't want to spoil the story, but there are times where you get the typical, is this a dream? Is this a, warping a reality? That the game starts to have issues that I can't tell if they were purposeful or not. It would make sense that things would, come in and out of the world, or fade a little bit, or not have detail. But here, I'm staying still. This is a cutscene, and you see that textures are... Well, I'm not exactly sure what's happening here. Like, it's almost like the camera's slightly moving to make an effect, but in that same breath, it's causing an issue. This is where I'm like, okay, is the game actually breaking? And when I'm questioning that, that's a problem. And unfortunately, it's a problem that in particular happens a lot more in the last third of the game. Like I said, there are story reasons that you could argue, but there are ways to do that where I'm not questioning if the game's actually breaking. And it didn't help that there were little issues earlier in the game. Granted, not as bad as that. I need to wrap this up because this video is way too long already, but I do want to wrap it up with this. There are things that I can complain about in terms of the presentation, the sound, the music, the voice acting, the actual visuals. But the thing that I want to emphasize is that despite that, they all come together with a unique presentation that feels indie rock. It feels like, that band that was in their garage hitting the notes over and over and over again, and it shows on the screen. And I think that's more important than anything else, because it is obviously trying to get certain emotions through in this game. This team obviously loves music and loves the feeling of music. And I think they expressed it here pretty well. And the little faults also can go into that. Sometimes things in music, and it's a point that they make in the game, aren't necessarily the cleanest. And that's all right. And I think that some of these things are all right. Actually, pretty good, to be honest with you. So, I've said a lot about Unbeatable in this review, and it's clear that the game has a lot of passion imbued within it. From having a good collection of songs, a striking presentation, to a story that does hit on good emotional notes, there's a lot to like about the game. In the same breath, however, there's a lot of little things that will drive people away or crazy, with uneven pacing, some questionable design decisions, and just the sense that maybe the game ran out of money before hitting its peak. Its story mode starts off weirdly, hits its stride in the halfway point, then sort of just runs into a black hole of confusion. Did I personally enjoy the game? Absolutely. Did I have frustrations with the game? Absolutely. But when sitting down and looking at the objective game created, that's where I started to struggle when it came to the objective-based score. Yes, it was doing some things unique, and you can't get it elsewhere in terms of the industry. You can get certain elements from other games, but the story integration with the songs No, not as good as it is here, even with those frustrations. With that said, the $28 price tag is pricey, and a lot of people, especially if you don't have the patience, are not going to be able to get through the game's struggles with the early going pacing and the pacing in general. They'll like the rhythm, hopefully, because again, there are little things, especially with some of the presentation elements, that may turn them off. Do I think the game is good? Absolutely. But where does it lie in the buyability rating? It scores an 81 out of 100, making it a solid buy unless you're hurting for cash. But that does not take into account my enhancer system, which takes the more subjective element of games and tries to match a game to you. Now, if you see the following enhancers on this screen and the next screen, add or subtract that score to your main score if you fall into that enhancer strongly. If the first digit of your score changes, refer to this chart to see if the game lies in the buyability rating for you. The fact is, this game has the most enhancers by far. By far. It is such a game that is going to be nitpicked in terms of how it does things and the presentation and the song selection and everything like that, that yes, that base score still applies, but this is one of the strengths of my scoring system, because if you have those particulars, and music is a particular when it comes to personal choice, you are going to want to use it, because again, it becomes a little bit more of an issue when the dollars of the base game goes up. Anyway, I apologize for the, well, length of this review, first of all, but how long it took to come out. It was Christmas time when I started doing these things, and even though it is the middle of January, work has been kicking my ass. And by kicking my ass, I mean I hate AI and integrations with things, because I'm dealing with that now. That's fun. Yeah, I don't want to vent too much, but yeah, it's been a riot. Anyway, if you like this review, hit that like button, and if you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button. On Twitch, right now, I'm going through the overlooked games that could be on the list for March, or the spring Steam no, I'm sorry,